Because union contains a subtle feeling that the two have become one. But if there is any feeling of two, how can it be union? In real union, when two have truly become one, there is no idea of the feeling of two. Hence, we never become aware that we have united with the beloved. We forgot ourselves and the beloved as well. This state is beyond union. Yoga means union, so it is a state beyond yoga. So I told you about the story, that gods descend from the Devaloka to meet Subuddhi, Buddha's favorite disciple. Subuddhi has realized his self, but he doesn't know that he has realized the self. The gods come and congratulate him, but Subuddhi says, I don't know that I'm actually realized the self. Then the gods say that a person who realized the self cannot know that they have realized the self. That is the nature of the self-realization. And they congratulate Subudhi for that. So this is something. So when the beloved and the lover both have become one, and there's no question of any two in that union, who actually loves who gives love and who takes love. So that state is beyond the trinity of the love, the lover, and the beloved. But yoga is the path that takes us there, I said. Yes, that's it, Daji. Yoga is not a single path. It contains so many schools and philosophies. It is a hugely diverse system. Three of these paths are especially well trodden: the Gnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Karma Yoga. Although they are thought to represent different paths of yoga, they are not at all separate from one another. There are actually three aspects of a single path. That single path is called as Raja Yoga. Raja means the king. So Raja Yoga means the king of yogas. It incorporates the other three. So Raja Yoga also has the other three aspects incorporated into it. Please note this point. We have started to explore the meaning of bhakti. Now let's take a brief look at karma and gnana yoga. Karma means action. It's a broad term. If we want to be literal, we can call each and everything that we do as karma. Tying your shoelace is karma, eating a sandwich is karma, but those things are not karma yoga. Karma yoga is yoga of action. It is the action that we take in order to achieve the goal of yoga. Please underline. What is karma yoga? Karma yoga is the action that we undertake to achieve the goal of yoga. There is a old saying, no animal jumps into the mouth of a sleeping lion. In order to achieve, we have to act. We have to do. Please underline, we have to act or do. And why do something? The path of Karma Yoga has traditionally focused on developing the quality of desireless action, the Nishkama Pata or Nishkama Karma as it is called. In Nishkama Karma, you are supposed to act without thinking of any result. But without the result in mind, why would you act at all? Action comes only when you have a particular goal in mind. Yoga has a well-defined goal, and this goal demands action. It will not happen simply because you wish for it. Any action we undertake for the sake of attaining that goal now becomes a karma yoga. Therefore, meditation is a karma yoga. So please underline those two lines. Any action that we undertake for the sake of attaining the goal now becomes karma yoga. Therefore, meditation becomes karma yoga. Now let us take a look at Gnana Yoga. Gyan means knowledge. And so Gnana Yoga is a path of knowledge. But can it be enough to simply read books or be philosophized? A rigorous intellectual process is not sufficient. By itself, it will not enable us to perceive the ultimate reality. So Gnana by itself will not enable us to perceive the ultimate reality. Only meditation can achieve this. With meditative practice, the mind becomes an unfiltered medium, allowing only truth to pass through it. Then our thinking no longer misleads us but brings us to the right conclusions instead. Therefore, Gnana Yoga is a meditation is Gnana Yoga as well. How does it do? It actually makes the mind unfiltered medium, allowing only the truth to pass through. In that way, we know that our thoughts do not mislead us, so but bring us on to the right conclusions instead. In that way, it is a Gnana Yoga. Gnana Yoga that we get here is backed by experience. Gnana Yoga that we actually get from the book is not backed by experience. And that's a very fundamental difference. When the Gnana Yoga is actually backed by experience, it actually leads us on the right path towards the goal. And hence, Dhyana, by making the mind suitable for that kind of a reflection can also be called as Gnana Yoga. Through meditation, we also are able to understand the wisdom of others who have walked the path before us. Unless we meditate, such knowledge tends to go over our heads. It does not resonate with our experience, so we cannot relate to it. Often a beginning meditator may read a spiritual book, but they may not understand much of it. If they read the book again after meditating for some time, they'll start to find gems that they did not notice on the first time. Certain books, such as the books by Babuji, have so much depth. No matter how many times you read them, you will always find something new. Even after 4 decades, his writings still reveal new things to me. From what you are saying, it seems like meditation facilitates both the approach. It facilitates both Karma Yoga and Gnana Yoga. And Babu Daji says, yes, correct. So now you have a reasonable idea why meditation is Karma Yoga, why meditation is also Gnana Yoga. It is backed by experience. The meditation actually helps in fine-tuning the mind so that the Gnana that we get actually takes us more directly towards the goal. In fact, the meditation is the essence of both the approach, said Daji. It is through meditation that Gyan and Karma come to fruition. Bhakti also. So meditation is the key. These three themes, the Karma, Gnana and Bhakti, are universal. In every spiritual movement, at least one or the two of these themes is present. They may not be called by their Sanskrit names, but they are there. We find the combination of Gnana and Bhakti in almost every religion. For example, almost every religion contains a scriptural element. That is Jnana. Religions also tend to have a devotional element, which is Bhakti. But not every religion offers a practice that would allow an aspirant to experience the truth of the scripture for themselves and to have a real, non-imaginary experience of the object of their worship. So, Daji is talking about a real, non-imaginary experience of the object of their worship. So the religion can give you gyan, the religion can give you knowledge, but it will not give you a path which will help you to realize the truth. In other words, even when gyan and bhakti are present, there isn't always a functional element of karma yoga. Of course, every religion has its own rituals, and in the widest sense, these rituals do represent action or karma. After all, these rituals are action taken by the seeker for the sake of coming closer to the deity. But in order to become conscious of the divine, consciousness must first evolve to the divine level. Without a sound meditative practice that can accomplish this, the mind will remain an abstraction to us. The divine will remain an abstraction to us. So that's a very important point. Our consciousness has to evolve to the level of the divine in order that we can realize the divine. So please remember this point. That is why we are actually working on the consciousness to make it more and more subtle. What is divine? Divine is a state of subtlety which is beyond existence and non-existence. So we go on growing in subtlety, initially to reach the level of existence and ultimately to reach the level beyond existence, non-existence, that state of subtlety. When we reach that state of subtlety, it becomes almost natural for us to realize the divine. So it is through practice that we gain knowledge, and it is through practice that we actually nourish bhakti. If you have not come into real contact with the ultimate source, what kind of bhakti can there be? If you haven't experienced anything, you haven't truly known the divine. Without practice, bhakti remains disconnected from the object. Please underline. Without practice, bhakti remains disconnected from the object of worship. It becomes externalized. We think of God and our imagination starts working. Perhaps we imagine a glorious being seated upon a heavenly throne. Or we conceive of an abstract source of power and energy. God exists, but until we go within and feel that presence, God remains a concept, a mental formulation. And most of the people relate to God as a mental formulation, not as a divine presence. With the imagination, you can create many things that are not real. In fact, you can only create things that are unreal. You may create wonderful illusions. You may create terrible hallucinations. They are your own creations. They are unreal. So this is another thing. The reality cannot be created. It just needs to be unfolded. Non-reality can be created. So anything which is created cannot be reality, which is also the reason why we say during meditation, don't imagine anything. If you imagine anything in meditation, you cannot go towards reality because meditation and the reality and imagination takes you in opposite directions. So this is very, very fundamental. When we actually teach people about meditation, we have to tell them, don't imagine anything during the course of the meditation. If they do imagine, they are not going to go towards the reality. The imagination will become a block for their journey towards the reality. Meditation does not create anything at all. Meditation reveals or unfolds. What does it reveal? It reveals that which is real, which is authentic, that which is true. Lies are created, but untruth is created. Reality can never be created. Reality is as it is. You see, meditation itself is bhakti. The word bhakti has become synonymous with worship in the various forms. To some, it is making offerings to God. For others, it may be singing devotional songs. These are outward expressions of bhakti. But when such outward expressions are devoid of inner feeling, worship becomes mechanical. Please underline. There are many people who have made meditation also mechanical without that inner liveliness. When you do meditate, there should be inner liveliness. Otherwise, a meditation also becomes a ritual, like a mechanical ritual, like in religion. Then it is only a ritual, all form and no essence. It is like an empty husk or a lifeless body. Yet, when that inner feeling, that attitude of bhakti is indeed present, should any outward expression be necessary? There is no need for any outward expression at all because bhakti will actually take you towards inner levels. That is why meditation is a silent activity. It is a worship, a inner worship. In deep meditation, worship is no longer an act, but an act of a state of being, an intrinsic quality of the heart. So please underline. In deep meditation, worship is no longer an activity, but it's a state of being, which is an intrinsic quality of the heart. This is only possible when the object of worship is internal, the first. Of course, this does not mean that you should worship yourself, he said with a laugh. That would only be vanity. Some would even call it blasphemy. Rather, it means that you have come into your deeper connection with the divine presence inside in your own heart. Rather, worshipping yourself means it means that you come into a deeper, ever deepening contact with the divine presence inside your own heart. The divine is everywhere, but in that case, it is also within you. So why look externally? When the divine is found within, we call that self as with a capital S. We find it when we plunge into the absolute depth of consciousness. There you find that there is something upon which the consciousness rests. You find that the consciousness has a foundation. Please underline this. So when you go into the absolute depth of consciousness, what do you see? You see that this consciousness is also resting upon something, or that consciousness also has a foundation. Then you go even deeper, find that foundation itself has its own foundation, and that under this foundation there is infinite foundation. This infinite foundation is the self, the underlying reality of all the things animate or otherwise. Yet it has no existence of its own. It is beyond existence and non-existence, you see. Nevertheless, it is the root of all existence. It is its support. And then there is something beyond that too. But by realizing the foundation of universality in your own heart, you transcend all that is individual and limited. So this is something that we keep talking about. So this is why I said that by the heart is the seat of the soul is the seat of the consciousness, and the consciousness is the seat of the feeling. By catching hold of the feeling, we move through consciousness. By going to the end of the consciousness, we catch hold of the true self, and from there we go towards the supreme self. This is what our journey is in heartfulness. Okay, many people have taken the consciousness itself as an end of the journey. Some other traditions have taken universal consciousness as an end of their journey. Consciousness, whether it's in a individual aspect or universal aspect, we have to transcend in order to reach the center. That is our goal. So I hope it is clear. However, the term self can be very misleading. When we read or hear about the word, It can conjure up a feeling of I-ness or individuality. Yet the yogic concept of self implies something universal. It is a common self or a self that is
Your
both
voice is
personal and
not
deeply
true, brother.
personal. 1 minute. 1 minute. We'll take the questions later on. We'll just finish a few more pages. After that, we'll take the questions. It is a common self, a self that is both impersonal and deeply personal. It is the heart and soul of each and everything. If the term is so easily misunderstood, then why use it at all? Daji says that's why often I don't use the word self. Yes, for this very reason. At the same time, it also shows us something important. It shows us that it is impossible to find that universal foundation outside of oneself. To find it, you must go in. So, in order to find the universal self, must have to go towards the individual self. By going to the foundation of your own existence, you discover that shared. By going to the foundation of your own existence, you discover the shared foundation, the common denominator of all existence. Thus, it is going through the personal that you discover the universal. It is through the subjective that you realize the objective. So this is very, very important. It is through the subjective that you actually realize the objective. It is through the individual that you actually realize the universal. How do you know when you have actually encountered a self? I asked. Raji says you cannot know. To find the self is to forget yourself entirely. You cannot be conscious of having found it. If you are conscious, that means you haven't found the real self. Then it's only your ego. Real meditation begins when you are no longer aware that you are meditating. It begins when you go beyond experience. But you have been speaking so much about how we must experience the divine rather than not thinking about it or believing in it, I said. Yes, said Daji. But truly speaking, we never experience divinity, but only the effect that it has upon us. Please underline, we don't experience the divinity in the way that we think about, but we only experience the effect of it on us. The divine self does not act upon us, but because of it, we are transformed. The self does not inspire us, but through it, we become inspired. The self does not bestow anything upon it. It has nothing to give, but because of it, we receive. So we must go beyond all this. To meditate for the sake of receiving anything is against etiquette. The best attitude is one of love and gratitude, which develops over time as a result of our ever deepening connect with the source within. Again, I say that yogic transmission brings about this results very quickly. As a result, meditation becomes the true essence of worship. That is why meditation is also called as puja. Such worship is devoid of pomp and show. It is devoid of words, forms, and every ideas. Simply put, it is to melt away in that loving essence. Then the two become one, and even the idea of worship falls away. This is bhakti at the highest point. It comes through the practice of meditation. You remember bhakti that we spoke about the first point, the first level, the second level, and now he's talking about the bhakti as the third level or the final point. So this is a very common question asked. What are the different levels of bhakti? Please elaborate. So this is a question that is asked in the exam. Please keep that in mind. So in the meditation, we basically melt away in the loving essence of the divine. The two becomes one, and even the idea of worship falls away. This is the bhakti at its highest pitch. Of course, Daji said, we also find many examples of meditational practices that do not lead to bhakti. I would call them mechanical practice. It's a technical approach, have no heart, but only discipline. So I said, as I said earlier, all these approaches are necessary, the karma, bhakti, and the jnana. There are three legs of the same stool. Remove any one of them, the stool becomes functional. But combine the three together, and the result is greater than the sum of its parts. It is superb. Raja Yoga combines the three with the effect that they are immediately put into contact with the self. This happens in the very first meditation session. There is one very old text, Amanaska Yoga by Gorakhnatha. Please underline, which describes the self as a king seated within us. Raja means king, I said. That is why this path is called as Raja Yoga, said Daji. And that is what heartfulness is, I said. Yes, said Daji. It is a streamlined version of Raja Yoga. Streamlined in the sense that it has been made effective for modern seekers who don't have the luxury of dropping everything and devoting every waking moment to meditation. Regarding all these approaches to yoga that you have just described, which should be our main focus? I asked. Focus on the practice. Focus on the three elements of practice of heartfulness, meditation, cleaning, and prayer. Practice them meticulously. Practice is the most important thing, that it is through practice that everything else comes. Without practice, there is no karma, bhakti, or jnana. Without practice, there is no yoga. It is in practice that leads to mastery of yoga, and mastery of yoga only means mastery of one's own self. That is what the master is, one who has mastered themselves. As Babaji said, I have not come here to make disciples, I have come here to make masters. So practice. However, he added, it is yogic transmission that makes the practice of heartfulness so transformative. Like the fabled philosopher's stone that turns every lead into gold, transmission can ultimately transform even the hardest heart into the sacred temple of God. So I'll just stop here. Any questions we can take now? Go ahead, sister. Palavi, you had some question?
No, sister, no, brother. Actually, in between, your voice stopped coming through.
Oh, that's fine.
That's okay. I don't know why, but
Are you able to hear?
now perfect. It was just one paragraph.
Oh, okay.
When you showed your hand, I figured that you are able to hear me. Then I quickly found out that maybe my volume, I don't know, all of a sudden without any interference, it went off.
So other people also
Perfectly.
have the same problem?
No, brother.
Brother, no, brother.
Okay. So any question on the 4 or 5 pages that we read in terms of how the meditation actually is also a Gnana Yoga, how it is a Karma Yoga, how it is a Bhakti Yoga as well. So the Raja Yoga, the practice of meditation, combines all the three paths together, and that is the reason why it can actually take us directly towards the self or the divine. I think it's fairly straightforward, but still, if there are points that you feel needs a bit of elaboration, you can ask. If there are no questions, then we can actually continue to the next part, which is yogic transmission. As a new meditator,
Brother,
yeah,
so
right.
there are 3 stages of bhakti, brother.
Okay.
Okay.
So that is an examination question. Describe the stages of bhakti and elaborate. So Daji has clearly written this is the first stage, this is the second stage, and now he says this is the final stage. So
Final.
just keep track of that. And please write that. And sometimes relating to bhakti, they might even ask in a closed book exam. So just make sure that you know this answer, whether it's a closed book or open book. Because bhakti is something that they would essentially want you to know, or they would expect you to know about. Okay? Earlier, they used to ask this question about bhakti in the open book. But off late, they're asking some questions about the practice, even in the closed book. So just remember this aspects of the bhakti. Okay?
Okay, brother. Thank you.
As a new meditator, I was mystified by the concept of yogic transmission. Initially, my intellect rejected the idea. It was beyond the scope of anything that I had ever heard of or even considered plausible. On the other hand, my own experience of transmission was that it was the best thing that I had happened to me. Therefore, I struggled to bridge my worldview with my prior experience. But experience has a funny way of changing the person's worldview. Having already meditated for a few years without my transmission, I could clearly perceive the two experiences were fundamentally different from one another. With transmission, meditation gained a new dynamism. More importantly, it becomes transformative. I immediately noticed the profound changes in myself, which continued to unfold over years. When I became a heartfulness trainer, I learned how to help others meditate with transmission as well. Yet, transmission means remains mysterious as all sacred things must be. Therefore, I was eager to hear what Daji would reveal about it. So Daji says yogic transmission is the hallmark of our method. On its own, our transmission meditation technique is just another technique, no better, no worse than others. But transmission is absolutely unique. It is what makes all the difference. Transmission is the key to the heartfulness approach. It is what makes this method so powerful. In many spiritual traditions, I said that the term transmission refers to the means by which the teaching is conveyed. However, its meaning is different here in the heartfulness context. Divine knowledge is never taught, it is taught. It is absorbed by the spiritual seeker when the moment is just right. Now, I asked one question in the morning. Which part of you absorbs the divine essence? And how do we know about it? It's been absorbed. So this is a question for you people to ponder over. Daji writes here, it is absorbed by the sincere seeker when the moment is just right. So which part of you absorbs the divine essence or divine knowledge? In the field of spirituality, teaching becomes paradox. Until you become awakened, any teaching will fall on deaf ears. After awakening, teaching becomes unnecessary. Real awakening does not come from hearing inspired words, nor does it come from reading books. It cannot. No description of the spiritually awakened state can create that state in one another, no matter how eloquent it may be. Between guru and aspirant, there is a resonance of the hearts. The awakened state is transmitted like a flame is passed on from one candle to another. Please underline this. Between the guru and the disciple, there is a resonance of hearts. The awakened state is transmitted like a flame passed on from one candle to another. The guru triggers that resonance. And through it creates a state of spiritual awakening in the student. That's how the guru works. They create this resonance or trigger the resonance. Then what is transmission exactly? I said. In the mundane world, we are already familiar with the concept of transmission, said Gati. For instance, we can transmit sound, we can transmit speech, we can transmit many other things as well. With yogic transmission, we transmit the very essence of spirituality. Transmission is a sacred emanation from the original source. It is nothing less than this. We can call it as the essence of God, and that would also be correct. So all the three are correct. Yogic transmission, we transmit the very essence of the source or spirituality or the essence of God, or transmission is also sacred emanation from the original source. So transmission does not originate from the person transmitting, I said. Does the fan create the air that it blows on you? He replied. We are surrounded by air all the times, but we don't notice it unless there is a breeze. In the same way, we tend not to notice the constant presence of divinity in our lives, though it surrounds us and infuses us. However, with transmission, that presence becomes subtly animated. The divine energy moves. It moves towards us and moves within us. Like the leaves dancing in a wind, our hearts begins to vibrate along with the divine flow. So that's all that happens. So the divine energy actually moves towards us and moves within us. So our heart starts dancing like the leaves starts dancing in the cool breeze that blows. What does the guru have in this then? What role does the guru have in this then? The guru is like the ceiling fan. His role is to trigger that movement. Transmission does not belong to him. He does not own it. Nobody does. Transmission is the essence of nature. Another definition. In Sanskrit, it is called as pranahuti. Let's examine this word. Pranahuti comes from two root words, prana and ahuti. Classically, prana means the life force, but people generally equate that to breath. This understanding may be correct if you view it as the breath of the ultimate. So, pranahuti is also the breath of the ultimate. He paused. You see, transmission utilizes prana's subtlest essence. We could go further and even call transmission the essence of the essence. That is why it is called as pranasya prana, essence of the essence. Its subtlety defies expression. It is equal only to divinity. transmission is only equal to divinity. It is so subtly. However, the question now arises, do we not already have the essence within us? There is already an entity within that there provides us with that continuous impulse of existence. That soul, I said. So there is already an entity within us that provides us with that continuous impulse of existence, and that is the soul. Daji nodded. You know, he said, in India, the summer is very hot. The land becomes parched and the leaves on the trees start to die. In fact, the whole tree looks as if it's about to die. Yet its roots absorb just enough moisture and nutrients from the earth to keep it alive. But when the monsoon rains falls, the tree really comes to life. They even look as if they are dancing. They have so much freshness. They are so much vibrant. So when we get transmission, we need to feel fresh. We need to feel vibrant. Just as the tree draws moisture and nutrients through its root system, we continuously draw sustenance from the soul. Please underline this. We continuously draw sustenance from the soul. But when we receive our very first dose of transmission, we become like a tree dancing in the monsoon rain. Our lives gain a new freshness and an unimaginable freshness. It is very real sense. A new life has been breathed into us. So for many people, this is very, very important. So we continuously draw energy like the plant draws the energy from the earth. We continuously draw our sustenance from the soul. But that is not enough for our growth. So when the season changes, when the right time comes, when we get the first dose of transmission, it's almost like the tree is dancing in the first dose of monsoon rain. Now we come to pranahuti, the other Sanskrit root, ahuti. Ahuti means offering. It can also be mean to take sacrifice. Remembering that prana is the essential elemental life force, we now understand that transmission or pranahuti is an offering of that pure essence. So he has given multiple definitions of pranahuti. To whom is this offering made? It is made to us. The ultimate source offers itself to us. In this light, we are reminded of Christianity, where the Lord sacrifices himself for the sake of all, where he gives of himself. So we can understand transmission as a process by which the ultimate infuses us with its own essence. As a result, our job becomes easier. We do not need to trek into the jungles as with many spiritual seekers have done throughout the ages. We do not have to ascend steep mountains. As the saying goes, if the mountain will not come to Muhammad, then Muhammad must go to the mountain. Since time immemorial, aspirants have been going to the mountain. They have suffered there, they have made sacrifices, they have taken great pains and made great renunciations for the sake of the divine. But with the transmission, it is the ultimate that makes that sacrifice. The mountain does come to you. This becomes the impetus for extraordinary spiritual expansion. So it's as if the God himself is seeking you, rather than you seeking God. God himself is seeking you. How so? I asked. When a higher force acts upon us, we need not only rely upon our limited capabilities. That is it. Just think of the oxygen tank owned by a scuba diver. It allows her to breathe underwater, which normally she could not do. This enables her to dive deeper into the ocean and remain submerged for longer periods of time. Similarly, transmission enables to access the deeper levels of consciousness that we would normally take years or decades to achieve on our own. There is also certain passes that are nearly impossible to cross, and transmission keeps us moving through all of them. So it does not allow us to, so it helps us move through the passes or to difficulties. It allows us to go to the depth of the subtle consciousness or the subtlest levels of consciousness. Some stages of spiritual journey can be extremely attractive to the seeker. They are filled with either joy, peace, or bliss. In fact, they are so compelling that we become tempted to settle down there and abandon the spiritual journey altogether. But this would be like staying in the same school class year after year. A fifth standard student says, I like the fifth standard so much that I don't want to go into the sixth or seventh. I would forever end up wanting to stay in the fifth standard. There would be no evolution. Sadly, many seekers love their way like this. Transmission will not allow for this to occur. So please underline, transmission will not allow any stagnation to occur. It will always keep us moving by keeping our state dynamic. Some stages are so wondrous that we think that there is nothing more to achieve. I made it, we think. But there is always something more. It is an infinite journey after all. It is an infinite journey, the path itself becomes the goal. Please underline that. In an infinite journey, the path itself is the goal. It is to put one foot in front of the other and continue evolving. Transmission provides us that with evolutionary pull. This is another benefit of transmission. It provides us that with this evolutionary pull. It literally plucks us one of the stage out of plucks us out of one of the stages and deposits us in the next at just the right moment. In that sense, it acts as a safeguard, preventing stagnation at any stage of the journey. It prevents resistance, it prevents stagnation. Otherwise, we could remain in a certain place for a very long time. In fact, we could remain there forever. Now, another question. You see the 23 circles that Babuji has given in reality at dawn. When do we remain entangled infinitely at one particular state? Could anybody shed light on that? When do we remain entangled?
Avadhuta.
Now, the Avaduta is a different state. You need not be an Avaduta. You might be just stuck as a materialistic person. That's also possible. You don't need
Liberation.
to go to a spiritual state and get stuck there.
Liberation.
No. Now, this is
When your focus is when your focus is outward rather than inward.
Okay, that's one possibility. But that's not what I'm actually trying to get at. See, there are 23 circles. If a person chooses to move along the circle, they can infinitely move around the circle. So there are two directions of movement. One along the circle, one away from the circle towards the center. You got the point? Inward. So one inward away from the circle towards the center, or other one could be along the circle. So a person who is moving, they might have movement, but they might just be moving along the same circle infinitely. That is not what we call a spiritual progress. In spiritual progress, we have to transcend from one level of consciousness to the next level, and then transcend that. In other words, we cross circle after circle to reach near the center. That is the direction of the mind movement. The direction of the movement should be towards the goal. Of course, movement can be there, need not be towards the goal. In that case, the movement is still there. You might feel that you are progressing, but you might be stuck in a particular circle. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So a person can be stuck infinitely in any of these 23 circles before they reach the center. Keep that in mind. Okay. So what is important is the direction of the movement. That's very important. Forever, I said. You see, every stage can be infinite. So every circle, what Daju is now talking about every stage, is every circle can be infinite. In mathematics, for instance, you can have a line that has no beginning and no end. It stretches to infinity in both directions, but is it actually infinity? It's only a line. It is one-dimensional. In the same way, it is possible to expand infinitely in a sort of one-dimensional fashion. This is what happens when we stop moving, when we are satisfied with whatever we have already achieved. So in other words, we prematurely terminate our journey. What effect would stagnation have on us? You would become imbalanced. So if you develop stagnation over a period of time, you become imbalanced. Just as every country has its own customs, every stage along the spiritual journey has its own characters. It has its own essential quality. The longer we stay at that particular juncture, the more we absorb this essential quality into ourselves. Please underline this line. The longer we stay at a particular juncture, the more we absorb the quality, essential quality into ourselves. It is good to stay in the stage for some time and absorb its essence, but only for a certain extent. If we were to stay there for too long, our growth will become lopsided, so to speak. It would be like going to school and learning only one subject. What use it is if you do astrophysics but don't know how to read? So even when we stagnate, we are still growing. But in that case, we are only growing in one dimension. So in stagnation, either there is no growth, or even if there is growth, it's only in one dimension. So it is not holistic growth. It is not evolutionary, but extreme. This is exactly what happened to Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni came to the seventh point and he got established there. He could not extricate himself out of the seventh point and move to the next level. Whether it was because of his own difficulties or because he did not have a guru, we don't know. For whatever reason, Durvasa could not move beyond the seventh point. So he ended up staying at the seventh point for a long time. So when you stagnate at the seventh point or any other point for a long time, what tends to happen is that you absorb the quality of that particular point. So Durvasa absorbed excessive power from the seventh point. So that is why he could not have any degree of control over that power. So he could make anybody literally cry just by uttering few words. He would make other people tremble with fear because of this power which he had no control over. So Durvasa is one example where he absorbed that energy or the power in the seventh point lot more than he could digest. In other words, in our system, what we do is we do experience the different qualities at different chakras and we absorb those qualities, but only to the extent that is necessary for our journey. We don't excessively absorb any quality in our journey. Okay. So I've just given you an example of Durvasa, where he absorbed that power. Likewise, somebody who kind of gets stuck at the second point can absorb peace so much that they don't feel like moving further in meditation. That is when they actually end up developing that state of Avadhuta that sister was talking about, the Avadhuta Gati. So transmission prevents this from happening. Yes, transmission prevents from stagnation or one dimensional journey. Yes, said Daji. It keeps us moving under all circumstances. It also accelerates the journey. Without transmission, you would have to work extremely hard for a very long time in order to move from one stage to the next stage. That is why the spiritual journey is traditionally thought to be so long and arduous. In the mythological lore of India, you find stories of people meditating for thousands of years. If you believe those stories, would you feel like starting the journey at all? Yet many do. Spiritual history is replete with the tales of sincere aspirants who retreat to forests, caves, and mountain tops where they put up themselves through extreme austerities, all for the sake of spiritual illumination. In India, it is widely accepted that one must undergo hardship in order to attain the highest state. I once thought of the same. As a teenager, I was inspired by Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and his disciple Swami Vivekananda. In the late 19th century, Swami Vivekananda traversed the entire country of India largely on foot, spreading his inspiring message whenever he went, wherever he went. Well, on May 1976, when I was 19 years old, I decided to follow in the footsteps of Vivekananda and left home to be a wandering monk, a sannyasi, as we call it in India. But unlike Vivekananda, I had no message. I was still searching for a spiritual awakening. I was purely a seeker. On the banks of the river Narmada in Gujarat, I heard a band of sannyasis on the veranda of an old temple. I knew nothing about their way of life. I noticed on an old man with matted hair who seemed to be their leader. His life of austerities had made him thin and frail. Eventually, he called me and asked what I was doing there. I told him that I sought something beyond what the world could promise. You will find God, but not like this, he said. This old sannyasi was straightforward and sincere. He poured his heart out to me. He was filled with regret for taking this path in life. He told me how he had left his home as a young man. He had not informed anyone. Nobody knew what happened to him. He just disappeared. I never saw my family again. My wife, I don't know what happened to her. I don't know what happened of my children. He was haunted by all this. He had also become disillusioned with his path. After years of wandering and begging for alms, his spiritual goal still eluded him. His search was genuine, but misdirected. So again, remember the direction of movement is very important. The search can be genuine, but it can be misdirected. And he knew he had gone the wrong way. In fact, he had considered returning home decades earlier, but could not face his family. I can still hear his parting words. You will not find God this way. How long did you live like this? I asked to Daji. About 6 hours, Daji said. Hearing this, I burst into laughter. I had assumed that at least Daji would have spent weeks or months wandering around rural India. When did you first experience transmission? I asked. On 12th of August, 1976, said Daji. At the time, I was living in a hostel at my pharmacy college. Sometimes I would try to meditate, but I did not really know how to do it. I would sit on my bed and try to think some profound thoughts. One of my fellow students observed me doing this over a period of time and said, Hey Kamlesh, why don't you let me take you to someone who can teach you how to meditate properly? You put it very crudely, actually. I know a chick that can put you in a trance, he said. When he took me to meet her, the chick turned out to be an elderly woman. And the trance, it was Samadhi, the eighth step of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Often people think that Samadhi is an extremely high attainment that takes many years to achieve. But in transmission, it comes immediately. I remember how warmly this woman received me, welcomed me when I arrived at her home. When she asked why I had come, I related my early experience with the sannyasis. She said, It is true that God is in the jungles and mountains where these monks roam, but God is everywhere, divine is everywhere. But if God is everywhere, he should be inside you also. In that case, why not seek him in any other, why seek him in any other place? Yeah. I was struck by this statement. She invited me to meditate along with her, and in this meditation, I received transmission for the first time. That experience was just finished me off. Never before I had experienced anything like that. I was so impressed. Then she impressed me again. After the meditation was finished, she had tears in her eyes. She was so grateful that I had come to meet her. Imagine the trainer being grateful to the student. It occurred to me that I had never witnessed such humility before. I had the same thought all over again when I met Babuji for the first time, who was her guru as well. Now, how could a novice like myself have been able to have this kind of experience in the very first meditation? It was only due to transmission. Without transmission, we struggle to master even our everyday mundane consciousness. I have met many seasoned meditators who still have difficulty with meditation even after years of practice. My wish for them is that they may experience meditation at least once in their lives. That is what allows us to transcend the mundane consciousness. Our consciousness gets an upgrade, you see, it becomes divinized. Then Daji laughed. Of course, now you have to learn to handle your divinized consciousness, and that's another story. Now, please keep this in mind. After the consciousness becomes divinized, you have to still learn to handle it. That is not the end of the journey. After the consciousness becomes divinized, we have to learn to handle it. So that is also part of the journey of evolution. He paused. We also use transmission to create noble qualities. Now, this is another use of transmission. We also use transmission to infuse or create noble qualities in the upseeker. Here I am reminded of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras again, the second limb of the eighth step, which is the Niyama. Lalaji, the first guru of the heartfulness tradition, had an interesting take on Niyama. He defined it as the infusion of the noble qualities. This is exactly what we accomplish with the transmission. And while we are talking about the Yoga Sutras, I also bear to mention the transmission helps us fulfill its fourth step as well, which is pranayama, I said. You see, most people think pranayama as only a set of breathing exercises. Now, that is why the word prana is usually associated with breath. But pranayama has a deeper meaning. The word is composed of two roots, the prana and ayama. We already discussed the traditional meaning of prana, which is life force. Ayama means expanding. So anything that expands the life force is pranayama. So pranayama means expanding the life force, I said. Right, said Daji. It is nothing to do with breathing per se. Whenever we receive transmission, we are actually receiving the very highest force into our hearts. From there, it expands throughout the entire system. It's an expanding life force. So this is how the yogic transmission fulfills the objective of pranayama. This is also another question. How is yogic transmission related to niyama? How is yogic transmission related to pranayama? What is the difference between pranayama and pranahati? This is also the reason that breathing exercises are not part of our heartfulness practices. It's not necessary because transmission itself does the job of the pranayama by giving the expanding life force. Yes, when we have access to transmission, pranayama becomes redundant, said Daji. But that does not mean that transmission and pranayama are equivalent to one another. I have read the Ramakrishna Paramahamsa transmitted his spiritual will to Swami Vivekananda. I said, yes, said Daji. It is true. Swami Vivekananda was also able to transmit, but never spoke about it. There are many other examples to be found as well. Transmission is present in certain strands of Sufism as well. So there it is called as Tavajjo. There is mention of it in Tibetan Buddhism also. And there is also reference to it in certain yoga texts like Yoga Vasishtha. You see, transmission does not belong to any sect or path, just as God does not belong to any particular religion. If a person is completely merged in the source, they can distill the divine essence and distribute it to others. Please underline this. If a person is completely merged in the source, they can distill the divine essence and distribute it to others. But it is extremely rare to find such a person. Great personalities such as my gurus have hardly existed throughout history. You see, if a guru himself is not merged in the original source, they still may be able to transmit. But in that case, what are they transmitting? Only their own limited sense of being. Such a person is not connected to anything higher than themselves. And even if they are connected to something higher, their transmission will be limited to the extent that they themselves have not dissolved themselves in God. So to the extent that they have dissolved in God, to that extent they can transmit. In other words, in every point in our progress, we actually become more and more dissolved in God. That's how we are able to transmit to others. Also, the Guru's power is at the back. Now that limitation will inhibit the transmission's effectiveness, I said. Daji said, of course. You see, in the deepest levels of Samadhi, our state resembles the original state that prevailed before we came into being. At that time, there was no movement, there was only stillness. But in that stillness, there was immense potential, immense energy. When that energy is set into motion, we recognize it as the original force or Adi Shakti. So energy which is in motion is called as Adi Shakti. Yogic transmission is that original force. It is part of the Adi Shakti. Only the original force can bring us to the original state. Underline this. Only the original force can bring us to the original state. This is why I say a bus which is coming from Mysore to Bangalore, if you board that bus at Bangalore, where will that bus take you? That bus is coming from Mysore, it will only take you back to Mysore. So if the transmission is coming from near the source, it will take you back towards the source. That is what happens. So all that we do in meditation session is we board on the bus of transmission. That's all that we do. Every time we board the bus, it will take you more and more nearer to the source. In fact, an even better term is original force, would be forceless force. What is that original force? It is also called as forceless force. You see, transmission has an effect, but it causes no reaction. What is the difference between transmission and force can be asked. Transmission has an effect, but it does not cause any reaction. Usually, force creates a reaction, that's the difference, but has no effect. So, two things. Transmission has no force, but it does create an effect. For the force, transmission has no force, it does not cause any reaction, but it does cause an effect. Force causes a reaction, but it does not cause any effect. So these are the two differences. So that might be one of the questions. Difference between transmission and force. When you become someone, you react. When you berate someone, you react. But is there an effect? Does that instant scolding change them? Force always creates a reaction. Only love can affect a change without causing a reaction. Due to transmission, only this love forceless force, we are able to regain our original state of union with the source, which is the very definition of yoga. So transmission helps us in aligning towards that unity or a state of union with the source. So in order to reach the ultimate state, the transmission we receive must come from that ultimate level. I said, yes, said Daji. And only a person who has evolved to become identical with that ultimate state will be able to activate the source in the form of yogic transmission. Here, Lalaji made a key innovation. He discovered a method by which a person who is completely merged in the source can prepare others so that they can become vehicles or conduits for his own transmission. This discovery is what allows us to have so many thousands of volunteer, heartless strangers, trainers around the world, each imparting transmission on the Guru's behalf. So this is innovation. The system of perceptors is innovation by Lalaji and Babuji. The heartfulness trainers are conduits for the Guru's transmission. Yes, that said Daji. The Guru prepares them and works through them. A trainer can even be a novice meditator, but their transmission still equals to the person who prepared them. So, who enabled them to impart transmission. That's exactly what happens. If there are any limitations in the trainer in terms of imparting the training to the Abhyasi, then the Guru takes over. In my view, this is a remarkable step in the history of spirituality because a mere beginner can now do the very same spiritual work as an evolved personality. And the Guru is also a conduit in this process. He is also a conduit in this process because really it is the nature's process. Transmission is an aspect of nature's evolutionary work with humanity. This is another way of describing transmission. Transmission is an aspect of nature's evolutionary work with humanity. But in that case, shouldn't we receive transmission automatically without having to meditate? I added. A farmer must prepare his field to be benefited by the rains. Daji replied. Nature is, as it is. So we attune ourselves to nature so that is the reason why we practice. In other words, we practice to make ourselves deserving so that the divinity present in nature can gush towards our heart. By which means is the divine impulse transmitted into the heart? What do you mean? Had said Daji. Take sound. Sound requires a medium that can vibrate, such as air or water. Does transmission require any kind of medium for us in order that to reach us? In Yoga Vasishtha, it is said that by means of sight, by means of word, by means of touch, one can infuse divinity into a disciple and enlighten him is indeed the real Guru. Yoga Vasishtha talks about it. So by means of word, by touch, or by infusing the divinity into the disciple. Said Daji, in many yogic stories, we hear of situations in which a Guru merely glances at the disciple, thereby awakening them. In the Sufi tradition, it is common for the sheikh to gently touch the chest of the aspirant in order to infuse their heart with spiritual energy. But in our way, we do not do any of these methods. We do not use physical touch. We do not need a guru or trainer to look at us. We don't need them to speak to us. Here, transmission flows unseen, but it is not unfelt. Its medium is thought. So in our system, we utilize transmission by thought. You see, the trainer merely thinks of transmission and it begins to flow. But at times, its flow is automatically without the trainer even thinking about it. In that case, what would be the medium be? Anyway, something only requires a medium if it has to travel somewhere. But transmission reaches the target instantaneously. So even light cannot travel instantaneously. If transmission can travel any distance in zero time, its velocity is infinite. That is because it comes directly from the infinite source, which is in all places at once without being at any place in particular. So you can say transmission it at all places at once, but not being in any place in particular. So it's there everywhere. That's why it does not take much time for the transmission to reach the heart. It happens instantaneously, and the transmission does not require any medium, like the sound requiring the medium of air or water. Seekers start the heartfulness practice by meditating along with a heartfulness trainer, who, also known as a preceptor, who triggers the transmission on their behalf. These meditation sessions are called as sittings. Sittings can take place in person or they can happen remotely, where the trainer and the aspirant meditate at same time in different locations. The role of the trainer does not end after the initial sittings. Rather, the trainer continues to be available for ongoing sittings. Ideally, the aspirant takes a few sittings per month from the trainer. The main purpose of taking ongoing sittings with the trainers is to provide us with the opportunities to receive the transmission. That is why we take the sittings. This supplements our daily individual practice. Our daily individual practice helps us to digest and absorb the transmission we receive during satsang sittings. So our daily practice helps us to absorb and digest the transmission that we receive during the sittings. Trainers are not selected because of their degree of advancement. They are chosen based on their willingness to serve and their knowledge of heartfulness approach. Please underline this. Trainers are chosen based on their willingness to serve and their knowledge of heartfulness approach. They need not be any advanced more than the seekers they are serving. They are volunteers performing a certain service. And just like any other aspirant, teachers, trainers must practice daily and take sittings regularly from other trainers. Okay, I'll stop here. Any questions about transmission? So the many different definitions or the uses of transmission that we have now spoken to can be a part of your closed book or open book exam. So please keep this in mind. What are the different ways in which Darji has actually described transmission? Can be a question. Or they can ask about different ways of describing transmission as a match the following or a fill in the blank, or even a choice, true or false. So transmission again from this particular book is pretty much very important, because even after we have read Babuji's complete works, he has not kind of summarized everything in one place like Darji has done here. So we need to keep this in mind. Okay, I'll just take a pause here for 2-3 minutes. So if any of you have any questions, please ask the question.
Brother, one question.
Hmm.
In the configuration of 23 circles, where exactly consciousness stops?
When you enter into the sensation.
Thank you.
So when we come to the 16th circle, there the consciousness and the potentiality of consciousness both are gone. At the 10th point, the grosser form of ego is gone at the 10th point. Beyond the 10th point, the ego is now at a refined state. So at the 10th point, the consciousness now gradually metamorphoses into the potentiality of the consciousness. So by the time we reach the central region, even that potentiality is also gone. Okay. So when we enter into the 13th point, we are in the state of just awareness. There is no consciousness. We just have awareness and gross identity. Okay.
Thank you, brother.
Any other question?
Brother, as Master has told that transmission is very unique to heartfulness, but he has also mentioned that there are some Sufi traditions which use it. So how is it different, brother?
It is different in the sense that the way that we utilize the transmission in our system, where there are hundreds of perceptors, thousands of perceptors who can actually utilize the transmission. In a way, the system here is, in other system, the Guru has to grow to the highest level in order to transmit. Take example of Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, or Lalaji. They have to go to the highest level to actually transmit. The uniqueness of transmission in heartfulness is that Even a novice who is in the earlier stages of meditation can also transmit. That is the system that Lalaji and Babuji have found. This system of perceptor, who is also a trainer, who is also an abhyasi at the same time. You know the system, you have the system where the perceptor system, where the perceptor who is an abhyasi can also transmit. In that way, it is very unique. The utilization of the transmission is very unique.
Okay, brother. Thank you.
Brother, it
Brother,
means only the preceptor can transmit.
Yeah, that's another important thing. Only a perceptor given permission by master can transmit. Because the power of transmission is essentially with the guru. So it is the guru who is present in the perceptor who transmits. The perceptor by themselves cannot transmit. It's the guru who transmits. So it's the guru's power which is working at the back of the perceptor, which is utilized for transmission. So we need to keep that in mind. There are many abhyasis who have themselves declared themselves as having the ability to transmit and have actually given sittings in many different centers, sub-centers across Karnataka and across India. Yeah. So we should not confuse that. So only a person who is authorized and permitted by the Guru is capable of transmitting. Okay.
Brother, one question. As
Go ahead.
Daji describes an example of one sannyasi where his search will be genuine, but it will be misdirected. Will nature have any role in directing those kind of candidates, or will any support comes from the nature or external things?
See, nature is always helping us. What is preventing us from picking up the cues from the nature's work is our own lack of ability to introspect or self-reflect. Nature is always there to help us, no doubt about it. That is the reason why nature goes on giving difficulties in life, miseries in life. However, we tend to not reflect on those issues in the right perspective in order that we can learn the right lesson and utilize it for our journey. So it's not the issue with the nature, it's our own ability to self-reflect or learn from the stages that we pass through in nature. Nature is always at work, 24 hours a day it is at work. Until unless we develop an ability to self-introspect or self-reflect or self-contemplate on what is happening, we never pick up the cues that the nature is trying to give us. Because nature cannot come and directly talk to you. You can only pick it up by actually introspecting on what has happened. Okay. So nature
Brother,
is always helping. We don't actually reflect and learn the right lessons. Okay. So I'll tell you one simple thing. When we go through some difficult experiences, rather than learn from the difficult experiences that we have passed through, we tend to hold on to the experience itself. And that's a very big mistake that we make. Our job is to learn from experience, that's all. We should not hold on the experience. If we don't want to learn from the experience, even then we have to discard the experience. If we want to learn from the experience, we need to have the goal of learning from the experience in a short time and then again discarding the experience. The experience should never be stored in the way that it becomes a block for our next part of the journey. And that's exactly what most of the people do. They
But
latch
brother,
on to the experience rather than learn from the experience and discard the experience.
But brother, in one case, they'll be able to learn from the experience when they have the ability to digest it, when they get the strength to, rather
That is
than.
where the transmission comes in. Transmission gives them the ability to digest and absorb the condition given. Learn the right lessons from the experience of life. So that's
So
one of the
how long,
functions of transmission. Sorry?
so how long are we allowed to stay in each point, brother? Sometimes it says it's a longer time. Is there any limit, time limit for that?
In the 8th point. Why exactly 8th point?
Not in 8, each point, brother. Suppose we are
Now, in our system, the moment we have absorbed certain amount of qualities in any point, the Guru generally uses his power to push us to the next point. However, the Guru also would want you to use your self-effort to move to the next point along with transmission. In other words, he wants you to align our life in such a way that moving to the next point is smoothened and the Guru's effort needed will be lessened. But that depends on us. That depends on our sensitivity to what extent we are willing to make changes in our life in order to move to the next point. That's up to us.
it
So
depends
that's
on our samskar also.
That's where the cooperation with the Guru matters a lot in our system. Why does Abhyasi progress slowly? It is because of the fact that they do not cooperate with the Guru in the way that they should. If the cooperation with the Guru is very good, then it doesn't take a long time to cross the Pindapresh. Go
So
ahead.
the samskaras also work on that, brother.
Work on what?
On the time on each point. Suppose Durvasa was in for a long time.
See, we don't know why Durvasa ended up staying in the 7th point for a long time. Whether he liked the power there, whether he did not have a Guru who could actually push him on to the next point, whether he actually made any self-effort or not, we don't know the reason. But we can only speculate on the reason. So all these three are possible. You like it, you don't want to move beyond. So you are stuck there, you stagnate. You don't want to make any self-effort. You stop putting self-effort because you think that you have actually reached the goal. Then also you stagnate. And thirdly, the Guru might not be there who is he capable of pushing the disciple beyond the 7th point to the 8th point. Then also you stagnate at the 7th point. Now this can happen at any point. I just gave the example of Durvasa because it's very relevant. You can get stagnated at 4th point, you can get stagnated at the 3rd point, you can get stagnated at the 7th point. There are multiple points. You can get stagnated at the 10th, 11th point. So there are multiple points in which we can get stagnated because we like certain things that happens there as an experience. That is why I said we have to learn to discard the experience. Most of the people think the experience is going to stay with us for long. No, nothing like that. A condition that we get in meditation, even if you do AEIOU and utilize it for your growth, the condition disappears after that. Even if you don't do AEIOU, the condition disappears. If you don't do AEIOU, the condition disappears fast. If you do AEIOU, the condition disappears slowly. But eventually, that condition has to give way for the new condition to emerge. Now, if you artificially hold on to the previous condition, there is no space for the new condition to emerge. So this is something that everyone needs to keep in mind. The condition will eventually leave you. Whether you actually benefit by digesting and absorbing that condition, or you just discard the condition without digesting and absorbing, that's entirely up to you. Food is prepared in the house and they serve the food on a plate to you. The food is available. Whether you want to eat the full food and get the digestion and absorption of the food that you have eaten for your growth, or you want to eat only a little bit of it and then throw away the rest of it, that's entirely up to you. Most of the time, people end up throwing away the food that has been given, the spiritual food that is given to them. Sorry?
Yes.
Any other question?
This preceptor's ability to transmit, brother. Regarding that, since we have novices to masters, so to say, whatever levels, different levels in preceptors. My question is, likewise, there are abhyasis.
Correct.
So let's say advanced versus novice, advanced abhyasi versus novice preceptor. How does this transmission work?
Master takes over the sitting.
Got it. Thank you.
So when an advanced abhyasi comes in front of a novice preceptor, master takes over the sitting. So we don't need to worry. That's another foolproof mechanism created by Lalaji. Of course, other thing to remember is that when a perceptor transmits to the Abhyasi, some of the qualities that they themselves have are also transmitted unknowingly. That also occurs.
What, brother? What did you say?
Some of the qualities which are part of the perceptor's persona can also be transmitted to the Abhyasi. So recently, last month, I was just telling my preceptor that somehow of late I have actually started getting more interest in listening to Hindi songs. And my preceptor said, oh, it is getting transmitted from me to you. Because he has a penchant of listening to the Hindi songs.
It can be anything, brother, good or bad.
Exactly. That's the reason why the preceptor should actually be in a good condition, clean themselves before they give a sitting. Got the point? So one of the tips that Daji said is that if you have satsang tomorrow morning, you take sitting the day before with a preceptor, before you go and conduct the satsang next day morning. Other tip is that before you conduct a satsang, clean yourself for 5-10 minutes. So all these tips are there for the preceptors to minimize these kinds of impact. Okay? Okay. We shall just, there are only 2 more pages. We shall finish this off. So that from tomorrow we can continue with meditation chapter. I would say that we have so many trainers who are endowed with the capacity of transmission is unprecedented in the history of spirituality, said Daji. In the past, transmission was hidden. It was completely esoteric art. Now it is freely available. This is one of the things that we have to say. Only in our system, transmission is freely available. Thus, it remained hidden in previous times is not due to the selfishness of those who had the capacity to transmit. It is just that today's paradigm is different. Humanity is evolutionary. Stage is different. The times now demand that transmission be widespread. That is where transmission fits in its role, being to fulfill this need. To serve all is its reason d'etre. Spiritual service must be selfless. We could never think of charging for transmission. That would be sacrilege. Transmission, Babaji used to say that he received all that he got for free, so he freely gave away all that he had. God is not for sale. He has no price. If you could afford to pay it, then why would you need him? If anybody ever asks you to pay for his spiritual service, then ask him that question. God is not for sale. My dream is for all spiritual movements to unite together and benefit from this transmission. I always say that there is no need for you to leave your religion or spiritual tradition. Transmission is for all humanity. You see, regardless of your religion and culture, you can meditate with transmission. It does not matter whether you are Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or Buddhist. Transmission will only enhance your faith. You see, faith is the result of our experience, and transmission is the giver of experience. Another way of explaining transmission. Faith is the result of our experience, but transmission is the giver of experience. However, no matter how highly we may speak of transmission, it can only be truly appreciated through direct personal experience. Words will never capture its essence. The attempt to grasp transmission intellectually is like trying to intellectually understand the taste of the peach. Is it possible to convey the experience of eating a peach to someone who has never tried it? You can describe its shape, color, texture, and scent, but until you eat one, you will never know what it's anything about it. Therefore, I suggest adopting a scientific approach and testing transmission for yourself. Create an experiment around. For example, in pharmaceutical research trials, volunteers are divided into 2 groups. The researchers administered the real drug to one group and while administering a placebo to another group, which is designated as the control group. The process enables the researchers to evaluate the effectiveness of the new drug against the placebo. In our experiment, meditation without transmission is the placebo or the control. By meditating without transmission, we experience the effect of meditation on its own. The next step is the experiment is to connect with the heartfulness trainer and meditate while receiving yogic transmission. Having meditated first without transmission and then with transmission, we become able to compare the 2 experiences. You see, I do not want people to take any word for anything, my word for anything that I have said about transmission. Try it for yourself and arrive at your own conclusions. So that ends demystifying chapter. Now, demystifying meditation is a pretty big chapter, and a lot of questions come from that. The next few chapters are more about the practice related thing, and quite a few things you might already know about the practice related thing. So that makes it easier for us to go through it at a much faster rate. Okay. So I'll stop here. Any questions we can take? Otherwise, we can conclude the session today 5 minutes early.
Only one question, brother. The last statement you made got me thinking. Let's say, I don't want to use bad adjectives here. Let's say a preceptor, X qualities, Abhyasi is transmitting. And it is, as some sister just denoted, positive, negative, all those connotations. I'm looking at negative, okay, unintentionally, whatever. What is a way out for the Abhyasi then?
The
Because
see, the thing is, whenever you go to a preceptor, you should feel rejuvenated, you should feel fresh, you should feel energized, you should feel positive. You should develop momentum for life, you should feel the ease of life, you should feel lightness. All good qualities you should start feeling. Now, if regularly going to a particular person, taking sittings, you feel that you're actually becoming more and more negative, then I think it might be something that you need to look at and see whether a change of the preceptor might actually be beneficial for you. Of course, as a precaution, if a preceptor goes into a state of negativity, we do at that time tell the preceptor not to give any sittings. So that precaution is also there. So the preceptor is told not to give any sitting so that unnecessary negativity is not transmitted to the heart of the Abhyasi. But again, it's also the job of the Abhyasi to see how the sittings that they are receiving, is it making them go towards positivity naturally, or are they getting more embroiled in negativity? If they are getting more embroiled in negativity, then maybe a possibility is to look at a change of the preceptor and see whether that makes a difference. Okay.
the master must be aware is the only safety net.
Why? I just told you what you can do at your end.
Got it. Got it.
Now, for a thing that you can do yourself, why would you want to depend on the master? That is my simple question. For a thing that we can actually do ourselves, so why call the master? So these are things that every Abhyasi should develop. That's why we are talking about it. So there is no compulsion that the Abhyasi should go to the same preceptor. Nobody has said that. If you feel that certain negativity is coming to you by going to a preceptor for, say, a few weeks or a few months, then you are free to try to go to any other preceptor. Nobody is going to stop you. And then see the difference. If there you don't feel the same kind of negativity kind of coming to the picture, then that change is probably worthwhile for your journey. So you remember what Babaji said in the book, that a true guru will ask the Abhyasi to go to another guru if they are not able to train the Abhyasi beyond a certain level. Likewise, a true preceptor, if they are sensitive, they will actually ask the Abhyasi to go to some other preceptor if they are not feeling that they are in the right state of mind to give the sittings. So there is a role for guru, role of the Abhyasi, and the role of the preceptor also in this particular scenario. Okay? Datesh, go ahead.
Yeah, brother. Where does this constant remembrance play the role in the judgment of this transmission?
What do you mean by judgment of transmission?
Virtually, my understanding is that when we are trying to feel our feeling in a sitting from an preceptor, we are trying to judge the transmission coming from that preceptor.
What do you mean by again? I don't understand what you mean by judging the transmission. What are you judging?
So whether we are feeling comfortable with that receptor or feeling uncomfortable with that receptor. So that is the judgment what I am referring to.
We never had any of this kind of a discussion with any Abhyasi till now. So I'm a bit surprised that you are actually doing that. You don't need to do that. Transmission comes, you don't need to judge the transmission. All that you will actually see is that whether you're able to receive the transmission and what is the effect that it's having on you. That's all.
Okay.
That's all that you do. That is not a judgment of transmission. It is just a question of what is the change that you are perceiving, both during the meditation and outside the meditation.
Okay.
The transmission changes you as a person. So our job is to perceive that change. Now, during the meditation, it can create some conditions. So we might be able to perceive those conditions. And outside the meditation, it might create a certain scenarios where we actually are able to handle the situation better than what we were doing in the past. That is the possibility that the transmission creates. Now, I have not come across anybody using the word judging the transmission itself.
Okay.
It's also quite possible that you might not feel anything during the meditation when the transmission is given. That's all right. But again, Daji already wrote in the book that many times in the early stages, transmission is not felt. What we feel is the effect of the transmission. It transforms us. That can be perceived. So if you're not able to feel the transmission itself, which is quite possible, there are multiple reasons for not feeling the transmission, but we don't need to go to that. But if you don't feel the transmission, we are at no loss at all. We can still feel the changes that can be brought about because of the effect of the transmission. At least that we can sensitively pick up. So that's what we do. Till we reach a stage, we can actually perceive the transmission directly without the need to look for the effect. So initially we pick up the effect. Eventually we pick up the direct experience of transmission. Okay.
Fine, brother. Thank you so much.
Nagaraj Patil, go ahead.
Brother, in about transmission, how the transmission is seen in a scientific world or in the medical field, how is there any contemplation for this transmission, brother?
No, not as of now, because in the medical field, anything which is not seen, which is not perceived, is not looked at as something that can be utilized for medical aspect. But anyway, like myself, who is aware of the transmission, the heartfulness practices, and the psychiatry, the scientific aspect, we do utilize it for our treatment. So it can be utilized by people who know about it. But it's not something that is generally available to many people because of the fact that many people only go by what they see, they believe. But the funny thing is, nobody sees the mind, but everyone believes that there is mind. So many times we have asked this question to both the Abhyasis, both the other doctors. Now, on what basis do you believe the mind is there? You can't see it. For every other thing you say that you have to see it, but the mind is not seen. Neither can I show my mind to you, nor can you show your mind to me. In that case, on what basis are you believing about the existence of mind? They are not able to answer this. For every other medical aspect, they want things to be seen. That's why when we practice psychiatry, it becomes easier to grasp heartfulness. Because in psychiatry, we don't diagnose anything based on any scan reports, based on any blood test, nothing of that kind. It is based on your feeling, your experience, and your judgment of what the patient has brought to the clinic. That is what you use as far as a method of diagnosing. So since we use that method for diagnosis in psychiatry, it's almost very similar to use that method in spiritual practice also. That's exactly what we do.
Okay.
So I
Thank you,
hope
brother.
one day transmission can be used for treatment. Like we are using it for meditation purpose. I hope that one day transmission can be used to transform people.
Yes, brother.
Even in meditation.
A long time I heard, brother, there is one research was done in Allahabad University about this transmission. they were published, or somebody has done PhD on this?
There are multiple people who have done PhD in Uttama. But nobody has done PhD in the way that is applicable to patients, different sets of patients. And that is the real evidence that we need to clinch and bring it to the world. Then it will probably over a period of time gain more traction. Okay. So Anil, go ahead.
Brother, I just wanted to know the scope of grace as well as transmission.
The scope of
Grace
grace,
and transmission. Grace.
grace and transmission. I think that's something that you need to ponder about. That's a question that you might get in the exam. What is the difference between grace and transmission? It will probably come in the later part of the book. We shall discuss about it when we get there.
Okay.
There's a big difference
Thank you.
between transmission and grace. So we shall talk about it later on.
Fine, brother.
Grace is far, far more subtler than transmission. So just keep that in mind. Grace is far, far more subtler than transmission.
In one
Okay.
recent speech, brother, Daji, somebody asked this question. Daji defined, when you receive grace, you're engulfed in joy, bliss, unsurpassed. He used these words.
So that's something that Anina also can remember.
Yeah,
Transmission.
one grace is equal to 1,000 transmissions or something that way. It is something is there. I think.
So grace is far more subtler. Grace does not require a medium. When the heart becomes deserving, grace descends itself. Transmission requires a medium. It is through the medium that you get the transmission. Grace does not require. Anybody can get divine grace. You got the point? So
Fine, brother.
you require a medium here, you don't require a medium there. Transmission compared to grace, transmission is far more grosser, or grace is far more subtler. And transmission is generally given to the heart. And as Pallavi sister put it, grace engulfs the person at once and takes them to a condition which is unsurpassed. Whether it's joy or any other thing, it will take them to a condition which is unsurpassed. But transmission works much more concretely, so to say. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, brother.
Okay, pa. So it's coming up to 2:10 now, 8 o'clock, 8:10.